Now, from the Signature Bank Studios.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and the left's violence continues. Not just in the form of attacks on Teslas, but of course including those attacks. How about this story out of Bucks County, Pennsylvania? A left-wing lunatic arrested for throwing nails and screws on the driveways and under the cars of people with Trump signs.
Oh, I mean, that could be deadly.
He got caught because he came to a grocery store 5 times to throw nails under the car of one of the employees because he overheard her talking about supporting Trump while he was shopping.
Oh, my gosh. Mm-hmm. That's a little bit of mental illness combined in there,
You think?
Yeah.
The Party of Peace.
And
Texas,
tolerance. Don't forget tolerance.
Oh, yeah. Texas man arrested for threatening ICE agents and Kristi Noem, DHS director, on social media, arrested in McKinney, Texas. Then you have that incident at the drugstore where that guy pulled a Mangione.
Oh, that's right.
And shot and killed a pharmacist because he had something against pharmacists or pharmacies. Didn't like
drug
prices.
costs, the prices.
Yeah. Speaking of that, speaking of Mangione, and did you see that referendum initiative authored by some retired leftist lawyer in California that wants to name a law after Luigi Mangione that would prevent people from being denied health care coverage? You know how government,
right.
I mean, California government does all these things by plebiscite. Referenda are routine there. So this is one, actually wanting a law named after a soon-to-be convicted murderer named Luigi Mangione.
So it would make it illegal to deny health care coverage.
Yeah.
That's what it would do. Right.
Just incorporate the sloganeering he used to justify his alleged murder and make that the law in California under his name.
Why is the left praising assassins, and why is no one denouncing this violence that's been leveled against everyday Americans who own Teslas or try to charge their Tesla at charging stations or at dealerships? I mean, where's the AOC or Bernie Sanders like, you know what, this is a bad look. We don't promote or advocate for violence.
Right. There's nobody. They're so concerned about violence, except when they're not. Joy Behar, one of the deep thinkers on the left, she, along with those man-hating shrews, constitute the show called The View. You may have heard of. Be very careful. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, who's called for prosecutors to pursue the death penalty against Mangione upon conviction for murdering that healthcare CEO. Be very careful because Mangione's popular.
Offender. He is young, and he's somebody prison systems are meant to rehabilitate and to punish. He is somebody who could be somebody that is rehabilitated while serving his sentence of life in jail.
Well, and I think punishment, there's time served. Our federal maximum security prisons are not a fun place to be, and that's where he would be. So I tend to think the greater punishment in what he did is to stay alive and live with that. I'm a big believer in people having to live with themselves and the choices they've made and their surrounding neighbors in places like that.
But do you think there would be a big backlash? Because he's very popular, this guy.
I was surprised.
I mean, this could be a backlash,
I was a little surprised there. He's kind of become...
The justice should be meted out based on someone's popularity. Joy Behar.
And Politico wrote an article yesterday that, are you ready for the headline? Will President Trump lose Gen Zers by targeting Luigi Mangione with the death penalty?
They're channeling Joy Behar.
Oh, my
Of course,
gosh.
the left is sharing a brain. Some remarkable goings-on, no question.
He's held like a folk hero. I just don't understand. And it's not only with our kids. Like my kids are, they were talking about him. I sat them down. I said, no. Do you know who he killed and what that man was all about? And what he did, his dad was a soybean farmer. His mom was, I think she was a hairdresser or a librarian. Came from a real small, tiny town in Iowa. made something of himself, was homecoming king, was a star football player, went to University of Iowa.
Who cares about all this?
Well,
what's your point?
My point is that they are siding with an assassin instead of looking at the man that he killed. That's my point.
Yes. Very simple one.
Well, a lot of people don't understand until you hit them in the face like, hello? Even adults that I've had to talk to while we were hiking, I said, do you know that he went to University of Iowa, that he's not a madman, he did not deserve to die, and he has 2 sons and a wife? And then they wake up like, oh, so he's more relatable now because you tell them about his past and that he was not privileged. Luigi was privileged.
I mean, it's irrelevant. This whole explanation thing is crazy. I mean, I know it's required for Joy Behar and other adult impersonators, but he murdered somebody because he disagreed with their policy. He disagreed with a policy decision that may or may not have been made by the person he murdered.
Well, he didn't even have United
else is
Healthcare.
Noise. Everything else is noise.
No, but yeah.
We don't murder people to resolve disagreements on policy, do we? No. Thank you. Case closed. Kyle Shideler is Director of Homeland Security and Counterterrorism at the Center for Security Policy. He joins us now. Kyle, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
With respect to those domestic terrorists, that's what Elon Musk has termed them, who are attacking Tesla owners, vandalizing, firebombing Tesla dealerships. Some arrests have been made. What do you suggest prosecutors should do to send a message to others who might be similarly inclined?
Well, that's going to depend on where you're at and what specific crimes were committed. And I think you laid out pretty clearly. Most people have a common sense understanding of what domestic terrorism is. They look at someone firebombing a car dealership for political purposes, and they say this is obviously terrorism. And they're right. That is the common sense view. The problem is federal law doesn't operate on common sense. Federal terrorism laws are very complex, but they require a variety of specific predicate crimes that have to be proven in court. Now, arson for firebombings is one of those crimes, predicate crime for federal terrorism, but it requires specific elements that have to be attached to that crime, such as an effect on interstate commerce, or an attack on a government building or other piece of critical infrastructure. My concern with the effort by Attorney General Pam Bondi is that they are going to get hemmed up in federal court, being forced to show the interstate commerce effect of these attacks and those kinds of things. Left-wing radical violent protesters and terrorists have very good lawyers, and they will have very good lawyers in this case. And these cases will drag on far longer than we think they probably will in federal court. We would want them to in federal court. The Trump administration has had bad luck with federal judges of late.
Yes.
They have not fully staffed the DOJ or the FBI with their people. So in all probability, the people who will be investigating these firebombings for federal terrorism crimes are the same people who led off Antifa rioters and firebombers back in 2020. So what I would propose is in places where it's possible, state prosecutors look at charging these sorts of offenders in state and local court. There are a number of states that have terrorism statutes, and they have terrorism statutes connected to their racketeering statutes, which means you could go after not just the individual person who threw the firebomb, but you could also go after the organizations and the people who supported them. So in cases where it's appropriate, I would encourage state prosecutors to look at trying to get in on some of these cases and make cases against these people without having to go to federal court. There are some places in this country where that's not going to be possible. You're not going to get state court to look at this, in Portland, for example. So you're going to have to go federal there. But in Texas, I think you could get a very sympathetic Texas jury in state court and put some pretty serious hurting on some of these domestic terrorists.
Well, you mentioned the potential RICO piece of it, too, and we have that report that Asra Nomani, who's a former Wall Street Journal reporter, did, at least as a beginning of following the money. Elon Musk mentioned the other day on Fox that we're going to go after those who are underwriting all of the violence. And we know who they are, he said. The president and he included himself, we know who they are. So it would seem to me that would be important evidence to build out a domestic terrorism case and perhaps fold in the financiers.
Yeah, I think that's going to be more challenging than Mr. Musk thinks, in part because of the way the radical left operates. The radical left does not have generals in the sense that we think of them. It is not a top-down organized structure. These are anarchist-style networks, autonomous networks that are built from the bottom up. You have the people who are firebombing Tesla dealerships. It's very unlikely that you're ever going to find an order that was given.
You could find a payment. You could find, but you could find a payment that was made.
You might. So, in the example I would give is the Georgia case against the Stop Cop City protesters and rioters and terrorists. They're prosecuting over 60 people for terrorism, material support for terrorism. In that case, they were able to show that the nonprofit that was supporting the protests was reimbursing people for criminal acts, including things like purchasing ammunition. But they were able to build that case in part because it appears that the people who were involved in that case made mistakes where the same network was running the website and the charity and posting support for the attacks. So in that case, they made a mistake because those should have been separate entities, each operating autonomously. So you may get lucky, and we should certainly look, but we have to understand the way the radical left operates. They operate from the bottom up, not the top down. So if we think about the way they are structured and we look for places where we can find mistakes that they make to make those connections, that's where you can build a case like that. And I think we should absolutely try. They should absolutely try.
How long do you think this attack is going to go on Tesla owners, keying their cars until Elon Musk is 130 days is over?
Probably. It'll go on as long as it's effective. And it is effective. You mentioned the situation with the healthcare assassin. That's an example of terrorism working because you now have politicians making choices, proposing laws in favor of what he was trying to achieve with that act. It's sort of the same situation here. The currency of terrorism is attention. And these attacks are getting attention, and they are bringing the focus of everything that the Trump administration is doing where the radical left wants it, which is on Elon Musk and the presence of Musk in the Trump administration and so on. So they will go on as long as they are effective and as long as they are providing oxygen to the narrative that the radical left wants to promote, they will continue.
The federal versus state court thing is interesting to me. On the other side of it, if you don't think you can make out a terrorism case, even if you have a terrorism statute at the state level, would it behoove the approach to be state courts anyway? Because look, I mean, take that guy in Vegas, just to say you couldn't connect him to anything. You can't. You're concerned about making out a terrorism case against him, so you just prosecute him at the state level in Nevada on arson. If there was anybody present, I don't know, perhaps attempted murder charges or whatever. Because the point here is to figure out a way to impose the stiffest penalty possible. And it really doesn't matter to me if that guy who firebombed the Tesla serves 20 years in federal prison or 20 years in state prison, even with truth in sentencing. I know. But the point is to say path of least resistance to get the stiffest penalty possible, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I think that's certainly attractive, and it should certainly be the case. We've seen that in other terrorism cases. There are examples where even federal investigators have used state terrorism laws because they were more apt for the individual situation. There was a case in Arizona with an ISIS supporter where it was a federal investigation, but ultimately they charged him in state court because the charges just lined up correctly and they could get some tougher sanctions. And the nice thing about state laws is that they're easier to amend. State legislatures get things done in a way that just the National Congress does not. Just things take so much longer, and so in state legislatures, if we're seeing certain types of predicate crimes being used for terrorism, the state legislature could go in, amend their code, and make sure that kind of behavior fit their laws, and they can do it much, much faster than the federal government can do.
Kyle Shideler, Director of Homeland Security and Counterterrorism at Center for Security Policy. Kyle, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile. Are you an administrator, staff member, or parent volunteer?